Hey, Kyle.
Hi, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, really good. How are you?
I'm well. It's a pleasure to talk to you, especially when you've got such a cool new record out. Congratulations, man.
Oh, cheers, man. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, well, almost out anyway. Soon.
Yeah, it's really soon. 9th of February. Oh my God, less than a month. That's so exciting.
Big celebration planned? You guys going to do anything with this one?
Yeah, I don't know where I'm going to be on the actual day of release. Oh, I know. I'm in the UK, but we're doing 2 gigs in the UK that day. Yes, there'll be some. Oh, except no. Like every year, I stopped drinking from January the 1st until my birthday, which is March 20th. So it'll be a very sober celebration for me.
It's possible. You can do it. I've heard it's been done before anyway.
I will seek advice from somebody who knows how to do such a thing.
My whole game is like a double shot of espresso right before, and then you just carry around a really hot tea so you have something to sip on the entire time. It's just, it's that drink in hand mentality.
Right, that's good. I'm totally addicted to tea now. Like over the last I stopped drinking coffee a few years ago as well, and I've got really into like tea, and I probably drink like 5 times the amount of caffeine that I ever did when I drank coffee, but I just do it via Chinese teas instead. Chinese and Japanese tea is so good. My God.
I agree with you. And there's something healthy about that, even if the caffeine's there. There's something healthy about that.
I'm going to try and convince myself that as well. I'm with you.
Well, let's talk about Always Ascending. Is it fair to say this album starts, and I suppose this interview starts, with talking about Nick leaving the band?
Yeah, I guess kind of in a way. You see, we actually knew Nick was going to leave the band a long time, at least about a year before we actually started making this record. Mm-hmm. And even though we announced it just a year ago, we knew before we even toured any of the FFS stuff that he was going to leave. And we'd known for a while it was going to happen. He was not happy leaving his kids at home and that sort of stuff. So by the time it actually came to the record, it was kind of old news. It was accepted, and we knew that we were starting new. But the situation was different. We were in a different place. It was just the 3 of us. It was me, and it was Bob, and it was Paul. And we knew that we had the opportunity to do something maybe a little bit different from what we'd done before.
Does that put extra importance on the record when you know, like, okay, this could be a completely different sort of a relaunch, as I've seen it written, especially in the press release?
Yeah, it was quite liberating, because I loved that decade that we were in a band together, and we did some great stuff, had some great times. But when you have such a major change in the band, you do feel that, well, we don't have to repeat the patterns that we've worked in before, and we can try different things. And when you bring new people into your band as well, of course, that changes the dynamic and allows you to explore areas that you maybe hadn't before.
Now, so what was different about the writing sessions, sort of with all of that in mind? Like, how did it really change for you guys, if at all? Because, I don't know, the other side of that coin is ultimately you still have, 3 of those people that you've written with all of this time.
Sure. And I think because the flip that balances out the yin to the yang of wanting to search for something new is, well, you have to hang on to your identity. Not hang on to it. You have to be accepting of your identity and not try to forcibly change it. And I'd love if the idea that when people listen to this record, within seconds they know it's a Franz Ferdinand record, but they think, oh, right, okay, that's Franz Ferdinand, but they're doing something I've not heard them do before. That's really what the goal is. And how we did it, I guess it's instinctive. If you feel that you're doing something that you've done before, you kind of, you find it boring, so you don't do that. And you push yourself to try things that you haven't done before. We wrote songs rather than about personal experience or observed experience of friends or people in your lives. We wrote songs about fictional characters, which we'd never done before. Played with time signatures in a way we hadn't, scales and modes, that kind of thing that we hadn't before. Some of the subject matter is different. I don't know, some of the sounds as well. And with any piece of work, no matter what your medium is, it's to make something that is different. It's usually not one huge decision that you make. It's a lot of tiny decisions that are informed along the way that make slight different changes to create a different whole.
With the music, it being, as it's saying, a more disco sound, a more dancey sound, did you specifically seek out that type of producer, or did the choice of producer drive that sound?
We sought out fully because of the sound that was developing on the record. I mean, it's funny because it is a dance floor record, but then when we formed as a band, we wanted to play dance music as a raw rock and roll band, and I guess that's what we're doing. We're just doing it in a different way from how we did it in the first place. I first spoke to Philippe Zadar, who produced this record about 5 years ago, and it was supposed to be just a quick chat, but we ended up on the phone for an hour and a half or something. And you know, when you speak to somebody, you feel you've got a really good connection with them, and you've got a lot in common, and you see things and you appreciate things from a common ground. And I love the sound of his records. The stuff that he did with his own band Cassius to Phoenix and the Beastie Boys. Everything he touches, it retains the character of the artist, but it pushes them into a new place. And that's the holy grail for a producer. And Philippe comes from that school of French house. As a DJ as well, his perspective is maybe a little different from a regular producer. And what I do love about him is, unlike a lot of guys that work in dance music, and not just dance music, but regular producers, he is not chained to the grid. Like so many producers program everything so every beat is perfectly in time, so that the tempo is constant and there is no shift. And if there's any shift within the band's playing, then it's corrected by the engineer. The engineer goes in their mouse, and the equivalent of Photoshop for the ears, everything is corrected and made perfect. He's the opposite of that. He loves the shift and the movement that you get from a raw band playing together in a room. And I guess we really bonded about that, making the record. The idea that you could search for the sound of the future, but still keep it sounding like people playing live together in a room. Because that's where the magic is. You know, that's where the real magic is.
I've got to remember hearing him, especially on the last Cassius record, where he had Cat Power, and was it Ad Rock who was on there and everything?
That's right, yeah. And the Cat Power record he made is amazing as well. That's really cool.
There's something, I was curious though, there was something about Greek folk albums that also, I don't know, sort of led you to this?
Yeah. You know, when I first started working on songs for this record, my father's Greek, and he's a part of this club or this group in Glasgow called the Hellenic Society. It's a group that celebrates Greek culture in many different ways. And he asked me to come in, or the society asked me to come in and give a talk on Greek music. And I've been listening to Greek music all my life. And I went through my records and my CDs, and I made a collection of stuff that I wanted to talk about. And one of them was this record by Yannis Markopoulos. And it was a record that he made in 1972. It was his interpretations of these old Cretan songs that were written, sort of like Cretan dance songs. And these songs are thousands of years old, and he kind of, interpreted them in a different way, in a way that was contemporary in 1972. And I went back and listened to this record again, and it had a very powerful impact on me in two ways. Like, one, I was listening to it as a musician now, and I was thinking, damn, this music does exactly what dance music does now. If you look at the dynamics of it, the fact that it's written about around one chord, there's no progression, it sort of stays in the same way. It brings in motifs, refrains that kind of appear, then disappear, and builds up, and you have the crescendos and the drops. You have the drops that you have in dance music today, and they were doing it thousands of years ago. And it had such a big impact on me when I was listening. I thought, my God, human beings have been searching for this thing for thousands of years. And over those thousands of years, we've just found ways of doing it slightly differently for every generation to satisfy that urge that we have to receive the joy and the highs that we get from dance music. And it gave me strength. It gave me succor, because I realized that, well, that's what I'm doing. It's the same thing. It's the same human desire that I have the desire to satisfy myself, and we're just going to do it in a slightly different way as we've been doing for thousands of years. But also, there was a really beautiful thing about listening to it as well, because I realized it was the first music that I could ever remember listening to. My first experience of music, I remember my dad playing the record when I was about 2 years old, and him putting me on his shoulders and spinning me around the room, and I can still see it so vividly, the room spinning around and around. And it was the first time I was aware of that elevated state that you get into when you listen to music, and particularly that kind of mesmeric music like that, where your state of resting compared to your state of listening to that music is completely different from each other. And, again, that's what I've been searching for the rest of my life, that state.
Well, I want to talk about some of the themes on this too, because that's the other interesting part about this record is as you were talking about, these characters and the stories outside of yourself. Of course, it all seems to relate in the big picture, I think, that we're all looking at, or at least, as a listener, that's how I'm relating to it myself, because, you know, I look at even just the title. You went with Lois Lane, which is interesting today because it's not Superman.
Yeah. Well, she's the star. I mean, she is the star. I mean, let's face it, Superman's a total trip. Yeah, he can shoot lasers out of his eyes and fly and pick up cars and all that kind of stuff. But I always find him a bit boring. Like like he's the antithesis of our perception of a superhero. Like, Superman is really Clark Kent. Let's face it. Like he's just a bit useless with all those superpowers. But she, on the other hand, is incredible. I remember seeing that film when I was a kid. Like I've seen that film, and she was the character that really mesmerized me. She was the one that drew me in, and she's the star. My God, she is totally the star of that duo. But the song's not really about Lois Lane. The song's about two characters, these two fictional characters that Bob and I invented. And the female protagonist, she sees Lois Lane as an inspiration because she believes that journalism could change the world. And Lois Lane is a pretty strong woman, and she wanted to be a strong woman that could change the world. And whereas the guy, he's not a drip, but he's a pessimist and a cynic. He sees altruism as being motivated by selfishness. That the only reason that you help somebody else is because you're searching for you desire the reward of feeling good about yourself. And it's kind of cool creating these fictional characters because you get involved with them and you wonder how they're going to interact with each other. And it was cool to create these backstories and see where they end up.
It is a cool way to... It does relate to the big pictures going on out there without having to insert yourself in it. Like, oh, this is how I feel about politics right now. This is how I feel about this. It sort of, puts it in the way that you could see it on TV in the exact same way, the way the movies do. It's a cool way of writing the song.
I do really believe that, like, some of the greatest truths that we learn, of the human condition are not through the confessional or from me telling you an autobiographical story, but through what we learn through fictional characters. The characters that we create reflect the world around us in a truer way, and you find that in all art forms, whether it's literature or film or poetry or even music.
Yeah, well, I hate to ask you to pull the curtain back anymore on something like that, but two other characters, of course, that stand out is Huck and Jim.
Right.
Who, have their own long history in literature, but also, again, in this relation with politics, especially as they are American literature and American politics today. They really do.
Because, well, when I was writing that song, we had the music for the chorus first, and I came up with the line, we're going to America first, because the song sounded American. Just the way we were playing it sounded way more American than anything we did. And I was kind of laughing at first, it sounds ridiculously American, like we're not American. It's just we're going to America. And I was kind of joking. Then I thought, well, what would I talk about if I was going to America? And I'd want to talk about the NHS, and because I do, I talk to all my American friends about the NHS because it's in the news. It's what we're talking about now, and we talk about it in the UK because we have this health service, but we have a government that is trying to sell it off without letting the public know about it. They're trying to do it surreptitiously. And in America, you had the Affordable Care Act, and it felt that you were moving towards, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but this is, for me, a measure of civilization is the fact that it is looking after your weak, looking after your society's sick, and educating everybody. I mean, it just seems like a really obvious thing. Human compassion, you care for the sick around about you. And I feel it's a responsibility for all of us. It's something that everybody deserves, no matter what their financial circumstances are. If you don't have a fat wallet, you don't deserve to die. If we have the technology to save people, we should be saving people. To me, that's a basic and essential truth. And yeah, when I come to America, that's what my American friends want to talk about, and it's what we're talking about in the UK at the moment. So anyway, that's what the song started talking about. So I was talking about going to America, going to talk about the NHS. We'll all hang out and sip 40s, and who we're going to do it with. And I wanted to pick the archetypal American figure. I wanted to find a character from American history. No, not American history, from American literature, from American film. I don't know, literature. Like, who's the greatest figure that represents America for me? And again, I went back to my father. And my first experience of American literature was my father, my dad, reading me Mark Twain when I was a boy and reading me Tom Sawyer, which I kind of enjoyed, but particularly Huckleberry Finn. I loved that book when I was a kid. And so Huck Finn popped into my mind. And as soon as Huck Finn popped into my mind, I remembered that Huck Finn is not a book. He's not the lead character. There are two lead characters in that book. It's Huck and Jim. There's the two characters in that book. And when they popped into my head, they were there in the way that I experienced them as a kid. The naive understanding that you have as a boy of 5 or 6 or whatever when I first heard those stories. And I had just two guys on an adventure on a raft on the Mississippi, dealing with the situations they ended up with, dealing with the bandits and the characters that crossed their path. And then I started thinking about it as an adult in the year 2017 when it was written, and it seemed incredibly poignant and so reflective of the current situation that we have, not just in America, but in any post-colonial society. And Huck was a 14-year-old boy running away from his alcoholic father that wanted to kill him to get his money. And Jim is, well, he's the runaway slave. He was being sold by his mistress, his supposedly benevolent mistress, she was going to sell him literally down the river, right. The expression is, and it was kind of chilling when I remembered that. And you do have those moments in your life, when you remember those sort of landmark experiences from your childhood, and you realize that when you put them into the context of your adult understanding, there's so much more depth and, well, darker depth to them as well. And they say so much to us now about the age we live in now. It's funny, and I went back and I read it again after I wrote the song. I read the book after having not read it for 30 odd years or whatever, possibly more. And it's a very difficult read. It's a really painful read because of the language and the use of the terminology and the way. But as well, I think in that context, there's a lot of compassion in there as well. And he really does portray some of the iniquities of that age quite beautifully, but a flawed era, a horrendously flawed era that gives us the clues to our contemporary flawed era.
I think it's hard for us sometimes in the United States for us to get a sense of how something like, even like the election, but like all of these things that are happening around here affect folks outside of the country.
It's not just happening in America. We have a similar situation in the UK and across Europe as well. It's depressingly retrogressive. It feels like for the first time in my life that attitudes have gone into reverse, and there's a petty small-mindedness which seems to be flourishing. I'd like to think temporarily. I sincerely hope it's temporarily, and I don't know, the optimist within me presumes it's temporarily, but you can't presume. You've got to make sure that it is temporarily. I mean, in the UK, there's, I don't want to even begin listing the problems, but we do have the whole issues that was brought up with Brexit and a small-minded xenophobia, which I thought would have disappeared by the time I got to this age and this year, which has returned.
Right.
So it's not just America. Don't worry. Like, well, you're not alone.
Yeah. I said it is interesting in the worst way that, when you go all the way back to Franz Ferdinand and in the context of these days and how it seems like something that could happen. And I talk about Franz Ferdinand, of course, the historical character. Sure. And all it took was one little weird mishap and suddenly you're in a world war.
Well, that's terrifying, isn't it?
It's terrifying.
Yeah. It was particularly terrifying is obviously the death of the original Franz Ferdinand. It was the pivotal point on which everything turned. The 20th century began there. But the reason that his assassination kicked off the war, it was not because he was shot.
Right.
It was because there'd been years of saber rattling. There had been years of countries threatening each other with war, countries building up their arsenals, countries talking about how they were going to destroy each other.
Fire and fury, I believe, is
Fire
what we're
and
getting
fury.
to.
Yes, exactly. And oh my God, can we not learn from history? Can we not stop this shit repeating itself? We need to look back and we need to learn from what's happened before.
Yeah, well, I think what you're doing is very positive within the record, the context that you made it in. Beyond that, I don't want to get away with just how fun it is to listen to this record. It is so much fun And for what you guys set out to do, you knocked it out of the park. You really did.
Oh man, I appreciate that. I really appreciate that, 'cause it was a really fun record to make, and we had such a blast making it. And I always feel if you enjoy making something, the chances are people are going to enjoy listening to it in the long run as well.
Yeah, well, I've loved it. Alex, thank you so much for talking to me today, and the conversation was great. And I look forward to seeing how a sober release party looks like for you. You know?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. There are going to be pints and pints of tea. Right.
All right, buddy.
Okay.
Take care.
All the best. Take it easy. Cheerio. Bye.
Bye.